we should stress on the fact that Russia was standing behind many terrorists in Russia itself in order to use those reasons for additional mobilization of the society. For a month, we've been talking like how many people were killed in Crocus, but in a week, Russia killed like 10 times more people than those who died in Crocus, but nobody is speaking about that. Russia is using few narratives at the same time. For the West, they are using the narrative that Russia is a victim of terror, and inside of the country, they are using the narrative that Ukraine is guilty.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, a special project by Ukraine Media Center and NGO Euro-Atlantic Chorus, and I'm your host, Myroslava Yaremkiv. A week after the reappointment of Vladimir Putin as the president of Russia for the next 6 years until 2030, on Friday evening, March 22, a shooting and a fire occurred in the Crocus City Hall in Moscow, which the Kremlin called a terrorist attack, which Putin indirectly connected with Ukraine. The ISIS terrorist group took responsibility for the crime. The American media, citing their intelligence, also reported on the Islamic State. However, the Kremlin denied this version. In today's episode, we're going to discuss whether it was a deliberate provocation or evidence of the degradation of the Russian special services, and explore how we can prevent the Kremlin's inclination to play the victim of terrorism card. If you want to learn more about this subject, please continue watching this video and subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our videos in the future. Now, against the background of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine and after the so-called presidential elections of the Russian Federation, in order to legitimize itself, blame Ukraine, and ultimately offer itself to the West as an ally in the fight against international terrorism, a mass shooting took place in the Crocus Concert Hall. Trying to present itself as a victim of terrorism, Russia wants everyone to forget about its war crimes in Ukraine and return to normal relations with the rest of the world. Even today, due to insufficient sanctions policy, there are entire industries that are not affected by sanctions at all. And there is still the transit of goods through other countries. Head of the Hybrid Warfare Analytical Group at Ukraine Crisis Media Center, Volodymyr Solovian, will talk more about the Moscow terrorist attack and its impact on the countries of the Global South.
So I would like to separately stop on this aspect of impact of Russia and the global South countries on the example of the recent terror in Crocus Hall, and the attempt of Russia to use this is the appeal to the threat of world terrorism, which is really relevant for the most societies. Therefore, we can see how Russia, like in this example as well, they are using their old tactics. Namely, they are trying to use local agenda, local fears and phobias in order to incorporate beneficial narratives, beneficial for them, into local media. And also, very often, Russia is using the widely spread in local societies, like theories of like hidden agreements. And if we analyze the terror in Crocus City Hall, here Russia is trying to make a parallel with the terroristic organizations and hypothetical impact of the USA, that they are ruling these organizations. And here it's like the signed equal. And we need to stress on that as one of the most significant threats in perception by the global South countries, how they perceive Ukraine, who is coping with Russian aggression. And here Ukraine should work actively in the informational field. I would like to mention a few words about my personal experience of participation in the Indian TV Republic One. The topic was dedicated to terrorists in Crocus City Hall. And what I should mention is that even local journalists, even local experts, they are trying to show parallels with terroristic activities of Al Qaeda, and in particular, Indian experts. They were comparing the terror with the attack of fighters in 2008 in India, Mumbai, the well-known terror acts, and thus local audience, why user of this TV channel, they are introducing the thought that Ukraine is acting similarly to that historical kind of opponent of India's Pakistan. So, in wide audience, they are presenting like the thought that Ukraine is, so to say, the proxy power of the USA, of America, and they are kind of making it equal. Ukraine and terroristic organizations. This is what Russia is trying to achieve in their information activity. And special attention, of course, we should pay to India, to African countries, because here, for Ukrainian expert environment, there's bigger space for operating, taking into account the smaller language barrier, more access to local media. So we should stress on the fact that Russia was standing behind many terror acts in Russia itself in order to use those reasons for additional mobilization of the society.
I want to remind you once again that the first reports of a mass shooting and a fire in a Crocus concert hall appeared on Friday evening, March 22. This was preceded by 2 days of the most massive Russian missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. For the first time since June 6, 2023, when the enemy blew up the Kakhovka HPP, which was also occupied by them, causing the biggest disaster since the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, Russia hit the Dnipro HPP with missiles. However, the West remained silent, as it did after the Russians blew up the Kakhovka hydropower plant. Director of the Policy Center and author of the book How Putin's Propaganda Works, Mykola Davydiuk, will share his thoughts on how Ukraine should act in situations like this.
I will tell you what we have to do in Ukraine. We have to be present. We have to bring our truth to these countries of global south. Yes, we will have problems with the West in the future, in any case, for sure. But now this is very catastrophic, thin territory. It's like we should be present in media. We should let our deputies to go and to talk. That is the global south. We need to tell the truth there because from presence in media, like there is sense in that, and these are political solutions. That is the first. Secondly, we should invite them more often here. So if we analyze and big top guests from the West, from Europe, we almost didn't have those, or like we used to have like few times less than before, and that is also a very important message. Like the Pope of Rome, he wants to us to have peace with Russia. He haven't visited us not a single time, but such a visit is needed, not just as a religious leader, but as a person. He should come and he should see what Russians are doing now in Kharkiv when they are just destroying the city almost for 2 million. What they are doing in Kherson, wonderful South City, and sometimes they have 40, 50 shellings per day. So let him come and see how Russians are destroying Ukrainian infrastructure. He wants to see Tripila in Kyiv Oblast. If he wants, he can go to Ivano-Frankivsk or Lviv, the city of Stry, and see what is happening there as well. So it's very important for us to continue the story that we've been making earlier, to invite them here. And the third thing, it is clear to fight with their propaganda and fakes, and Ukraine in this direction has seen and knows quite a lot. We have to share this experience. We have to show it, to tell about it, because earlier on it used to be just our problem. But today we can see that Putin is using these stories in the West, and very often that is successful. And the West doesn't always understand how to withstand that with their democratic tools. And the last thing regarding the terrorism, so the intelligence was saying that to Putin that it will be Crocus, when and how, but that was beneficial for Putin. For him, it's totally a change of the paradigm. He is a victim right now. The victim, like you should feel sympathy to the victim, and they are trying to manipulate with that. We need to play with this message. We need to show what Russians are doing here more, because just in a week, like for a month, we've been talking like how many people were killed in Crocus, but in a week, Russia killed like 10 times more people than those who died in Crocus. But nobody is speaking about that because very often, and it's a challenge for us and Western politicians, our diplomats, etc., very often we are taken to the level of statistics. Like, okay, 100 people died in Ukraine today. What can we do with that? It's statistics. But in Russia, terrorism, fresh topic.
Whoever organized this terrorist attack, it plays in favor of the Kremlin in terms of consolidating Russian society against the common enemy. And this enemy, in the interpretation of Russian propaganda, is represented by the Ukrainian regime and the collective West. This is what the Kremlin will try to push inside the Russian Federation, and it will broadcast to foreign audiences that Russia is the victim of terrorists. Director of European Resilience Initiative Center in Berlin, Germany, Serhiy Sumlenny, will elaborate more on this.
I would like to underline just one moment. Like, first of all, Russia indeed is trying to use this situation in Moscow, Crocus City, in order to achieve their political goals. And that's absolutely, like I have mentioned it already. It's not the first time that Russia is doing that, and in Putin's narrative, it is fully included. So those were like destruction of houses in Moscow in 1999, and it was unclear what was happening in there, and those were some internal operations of FSB, and looking at all those proofs that would happen. Most probably that was internal operation, but not only. We do remember that with similar shellings, Ukraine was blamed that Ukrainian militaries are shelling Luhansk Oblast, and we've seen that Russia used something else for their internal conflict. So sometimes the commanders of those units they were blamed that they used certain weapons in order to shell Luhansk, like Lozovay, for example. So he was blamed by his own people. So even for internal rhetorics, it was a kind of secret, and they confessed in that. What is interesting in this situation regarding Crocus City is that Russia is using few narratives at the same time. For the West, they are using the narrative that Russia is a victim of terror, and inside of the country, they are using the narrative that Ukraine is guilty. And inside, actually, this narrative of terror, it's working, and actually, it came to, so to say, good place, because we can see that now in Russia, they have the increased number of attacks on people who have the so-called like more dark hair, more dark skin, some characteristic features, and we see that Russians, they are pretty radical, and they demand to exclude all the non-Russians from Russia.
You've been watching a special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic course dedicated to the Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. In the description under this video, you can find information on how you can help Ukraine fight Russian aggression. If you find our work useful, please like and share this video. Slava Ukraini!